All right, you're listening to 91.5 WUML Lowell, Blues Deluxe, and I have the great Jon Pousette-Dart on with me today. Hello there, John. How are you?
It's great to be here. Thank you for it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, John.
You're welcome. So let's start from your beginnings. Where'd you grow up, John?
I grew up right outside of New York, north of New York City, in Rockland County. My father was an artist, and my sister was born in New York, and then he was a painter, and he wanted more space to do large work, which he did. He liked to work with large surfaces, and so he moved to Rockland County, and so I spent most of my youth there, growing up in Rockland County, which was right outside the city, and then from there, I slowly migrated out to the rest of the world. First to California, and then returned here to the East Coast, and where the band got the band started in Boston.
What year was that?
I right around I was at the end of the '60s. I was called, and my number was 52. I was drafted to be inducted and to go to Vietnam, and I had thought about it, and I wrote a paper about the that I believed in the volunteer army, and I didn't believe in the Vietnam War, and I was granted I got a CO during the Vietnam War, but I was called for alternative service. And I went out to University Pacific for a year. I went to school in California, and there I met in Stockton, California, and I met my bass player there, and so we started playing around, and then we both quit after a year in school, and I moved back east, and I started just playing hoots around the New York and New England and the Cape and the islands, and that would have been 71, maybe 71, I think, around there. And then I happened to be playing one night out in I had my grandparents used to live in Nantucket, and I have my cousins still live on Nantucket year round. And I went up there to play. I was just hitting, like, doing open mics and playing around. And I played. There was a club called the Chicken Box, and John Hammond was playing there for 3 nights, and a friend of mine got me to sit down in front of him, and he heard me, and he had me open for him for 3 nights at the Chicken Box. And one night Don Law came down, and Don Law Jr., who was there, and Don Law Sr. and John Hammond Sr. were both talent scouts together at CBS, so they knew each other. And John knew Don. So Don came down, and he saw me play, and he asked me what I was doing after the show and said I should come to Boston, thinking, do you want to, you should try maybe come to Boston, see if we can work together. So I went to Boston. That was the start of the whole journey.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you put a band together. Were you solo first? Were you doing duo?
Yeah, I
stuff
was
first?
when I met Don. I was solo. I was playing solo, and then as soon as I started playing around solo, and then I called up Troy. He was in California. At that time he was in Southern California, and I asked him to come east, and he was playing guitar back then, and I said, do you want to come back here and play bass? And so he came back and just learned bass. We just shedded, and he just picked up the bass immediately, and we started working as a duo. And then we worked we just got on the college circuit, nonstop as a duo. And then we put up a sign in a music store in Cambridge, and John Curtis answered it, and we became a trio. And then gradually we started looking for drummers, and we started auditioning a lot of drummers, and became a band after we had worked as a trio for a long time.
And then you became a band not too long after that.
Right, exactly.
Let's talk about the first record. I love the cover of the first record.
Mm-hmm.
That was classic cover with you holding. That's you, right? Holding the sign.
No, that's actually that is a friend of mine named Trent Arterbury, who's a very gifted mime, and I met him in California. I met him in La Jolla, California, and he was a really we had a bunch of mutual friends out there, and he had been coming back east and he did shows doing mime and whatnot, and we asked him to come up and and go out and hold up the sign in the middle of Walden Pond when it was like below freezing. He froze. He literally froze to death doing that shoot. And we went out in the middle of Walden Pond, and he held up the sign. And so he was, he's still going too. He's still very active. He's a very talented guy, Trent Arterbury.
So how did you get a record deal like that? Well, it was a few years. You started around 73, I'm guessing, 72, 73.
We started kind of shopping, to around 73. Yeah, around 73. And, we went through the same process as I would imagine every band had gone through, which is you submit to all the labels, you get tons of rejections. No, 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 no. We were turned down by, multiple labels. And then it happened that Don contacted there was a legendary record guy named Al Corey from Capitol, and he had signed a slew of artists to Capitol way back. And it turns out he was in LA, but he grew up in Boston, and he was a big fan of Boston because it was his home. So he flew out and saw us play in the Inn Square. I think it was the Inn Square Men's Bar or something like that, and signed us. And he signed us. And then we signed with Capitol, and about a few months later, there was a power struggle in Capitol, and he was ousted by a guy named Bob Zimmerman, I think was his name, became the president. And so we flew out. Don and I flew out to Hollywood. We were sitting in the Brown Derby on Hollywood and Vine, and we're sitting down with this, this couple of Capitol guys, and they're saying, "So what are you doing here?" Like we were the last things that he signed, and it was a new regime. And so he had signed Boyce and Hart, who did the Monkees, and us, and about 8 other artists. And so we sat down with him at a table I remember sitting down with John Carter, who became our A&R man, and Rupert Perry, who was this very staid English gentleman. He was from the English division. They said, "Well, we're going to send you to Nashville," and they sent us down to Nashville and Norbert Putnam's going to produce your record, and that was that. That's literally like that's how things were done. It was just like a fluke, And so we wound up going down and doing the record, and it was just it just happened to be Kismet to work with Norbert and that crew, because Norbert and David Briggs and Kenny Buttrey were like that was the last rhythm section that Elvis was with. I mean, those guys were like the cream of the crop of Memphis. And so we just landed in a very good, fertile, creative spot. I learned a ton from Norbert and all of those guys.
I can tell you, we played the hell out of that record when it came out, because I was there at the radio station playing those records.
It was really something else just walking into that, because when we arrived at Quad, he had the old Quad in Grand in Tennessee, in Nashville, which was right next to Waylon Jennings' place, and I walked in on the tail end of Gene Eichelberger mixing "Drift Away" by Dobie Gray. Those guys were just finishing the single, which is, I think, one of the greatest singles ever made for me. I love that record.
Yeah.
And my hero, Reggie Young, was playing guitar on it. And Steve Gibson and Reggie Young were just walking out. So that was just something else to kind of just get ensconced in a very deep bench of players and have them, participating in our record, which was just, it was just kind of, it was just pure luck to be a green kid and just walk in and just kind of get this massive education spot on, so it was wonderful.
Oh, yeah. And college radio, all of us in college radio were supporting you when you were.
Well, college radio was just the greatest thing. The album radio, I got to tell you, that was just, a beautiful era. It was just a beautiful era. It's hard to describe that to people now, what that was and how you broke, and how the whole process of how it came about, how things went through with album radio. It was just a different world.
Well, I look at your first few records. They're rock records, but you know something? You were probably the first Americana band too from that period. There wasn't even a genre called Americana, but what you were doing was you were mixing some of the country and all that other stuff in your music, and it was still rock.
Yes, that's true. I mean, that was what was going on. It was very much like what's a lot of things that are going on now back then, but there wasn't too much of it. I mean, the only other bands that were really kind of that I was aware of that were kind of similar to that were kind of what was going on with Firefall and Pure Prairie League and
Right.
some and the Burrito Brothers and and that those kind of things, and the Graham Parsons and whatnot. But yeah, it was not so much. It wasn't
Straight ahead
mainstream.
rock. Yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
straight ahead rock. It was there
And,
was
e-
there
and
was
even
more to it.
yeah, and even back then, even we all worked with the Eagles when they first broke, and they were still there back then when Witchy Women and all that stuff. They were kind of country, and then they kind of really veered more hard rock. Bernie left the band, and Don Felder took over, and they became much more kind of rock based as opposed to the kind of country Americana side of them that they had in the early on.
But yeah, you were one of those original guys that was doing that, which was great. Local too. That was even better.
Well, it was great. It was not, the Boston area was like really amazing, fertile place to be right then. It was just, I was very fortunate to arrive there when I did at that time in Boston because there were some really great people around, and Don was, able to create a lot of situations that were really conducive to our, crossing paths with a lot of people. So it was very, very fortuitous. I feel very fortunate and lucky, and I also feel very fortunate and lucky still for the fan base that stayed with the music, since then. And that's been, it's really great to go up, still, I'm going up this weekend to play up there, and it's just, it's really wonderful to have really deep bench of people who really appreciate the music in a real way. It means a lot.
So Amnesia was the second record, and that was even bigger than the first record.
I think it did. I think it was a little more. Yes, I think it was more successful than the first one. Yeah.
And that was 1977. Incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Pousette-Dart #3, the third album, came out in '78. Well, you were busy those years.
There was one of the benefits of being with Don was that he was at that time he was probably the biggest promoter in the Northeast, and so he really everything that came through New England he was involved with, and he was with Premier Talent. So we signed with Premier Talent. Premier Talent at that time was everybody. I mean, that was, it was all the English bands. Springsteen was there then. There was a really high concentration of, especially of English bands coming through. So he would throw us on the opening slots of a lot of these bands that we didn't really have much in common with, but it opened us up to a whole nother, genre and audience that was great. I mean, we earned a lot of new fans from opening for Yes and Frampton and Gary Wright and all of those kinds of acts that were very, different than the American, stuff that was going on here. So it was a real cross section of people that we were, crossing paths with and being able to play to.
You opened for the Frampton Comes Alive tour, I see.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
It was just huge. He was just, he was great too. He was really good. His show was amazing, and he had, he filled the hall. I mean, he just really packed it. That was huge. Those tours were huge. And the real big ones was when we did some of the biggest ones was with him and Yes and Gary Wright at RFK and some of these real. And back then it was wild. I mean, it was another world. I mean, it wasn't, because there wasn't any no alcohol or no drugs or anything like that in the stadiums. I mean, people were freaking, it was a whole nother era.
Yep.
I mean, it was just a completely different. It was like the Wild West back then.
And you opened for Yes, the Fragile tour.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, some big tours you were part of.
Well, it was much credit to the guys at Premier and Don for throwing us out there. They really just kind of threw us in the maelstrom. I mean, we did some shows that were kind of really staggering. I mean, I remember going and doing Foxborough. Now what's that, Gillette Stadium now? Opening for Mahavishnu and who is the real character. I'm trying to think of his name. The real character rocker, the huge band. And they canceled. Black Oak, Arkansas. No, not Black Oak. Yeah, Black Oak, Arkansas was on the bill, and they canceled. And they threw us in the slot. So it's like this folk tour replacing Black Oak, Arkansas. So you'd have people like who were just kind of going, "What are you doing up there?" and just hurling shit, at the stage. Excuse my language.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting. It was interesting, being exposed to all these different, factions of things going on.
So you did 4 records before the band broke up. The 4th one was called Never Enough, 79. What happened after that?
What happened was almost the perfect storm in the cultural scene in the record world, because we were, the 70s was a very, very decadent era. I mean, it was a great time to be there because there was just, it was like the Wild West in terms of what was going on. There was no, people were just taking chances. They'd roll the dice behind things. There was a whole different era. It was still deep in kind of experimentation with everything, with going on. There was a lot of excess on every level. And slowly, when the whole thing, two things happened. One, disco kind of set in and started to plant itself kind of in the music scene. And also, we were spending tons of money making records back then. I mean, we spent a fortune on doing what we were doing. And, like at that time, I remember Fleetwood Mac turned in Tusk for like an amazing amount of money. It was just a very decadent period. And we were with Capitol, and at that time, a band called the Knack turned in My Sharona. They turned in the record for 10 grand.
I remember that.
They turned in the entire record for 10 grand. And all of a sudden, the guys at the label went, wait a minute, 10 grand. So people started to go, okay, we're going to start cutting budgets. And the disco scene started to plant itself. And also the techno scene from England started really hitting. So it was a real abrupt shift maybe not abrupt, but it was a gradual, or however you'd call it. But there was a huge seismic shift in the entire music structure and music scene and what was going on with radio. And it just felt, it was a very difficult time. We couldn't get footing in it. And it just felt like, and we did our last tour. We went out and played, we went across the country. I think we did 60 dates back and forth, all one-nighters. And the Capitol pulled the tour support the day before we were to leave. We took a loan out from the bank to rent the bus, went across the country and back, came back, and we didn't have a penny in our pocket. We were just like broke. And everybody just went, okay, that's that, because we're pouring our hearts out and working our brains out, and just the return wasn't happening. So it was a tough time,
So then you broke up and you went solo after that. How long after that did you start to do solo stuff yourself?
Well, I started doing it. I started doing it almost immediately. But after the band broke up, what I did is I went to New York, moved to New York, and I started doing a lot of session work, jingle work, and singing. And because I could make, back then, singers could make equal money to actors when you were singing commercials and jingles, because you were on the after and the SAG contract. So if you were singing on a commercial, you'd make what the people acting in the commercial were making. So it was a good way to make a living. So I did that for a while, and then during that time, I started a band with a lot of guys in New York. Some guys who I'm still very close with, John McCurry, who became a legendary guitar player for everyone in New York in the studio. He's still an amazing player. We're still close friends. And I started going out and playing both solo, and then I created a New York band and started going around playing with a different band, basically, and just call it the Jon Pousette-Dart Band, so that people knew it wasn't the original guys, because I didn't want to confuse, and I wanted to give full credit to them, because everybody was really fond of the original band.
So tell me about your relationships with the local musicians in this area, because you were around for a while here in Massachusetts with guys like Montgomery and all those guys that were playing around, the Aerosmith guys.
Hmm.
Tell me what that scene was like during that time in the late
Well, it was
'70s.
just a smaller. It was a smaller, more personal. You were just bumping paths with more people. There was a closer, smaller scene. Bonnie was there. I got to know Bonnie very well. We did a lot of dates with Bonnie. James, I got to know James very well. Still, known close friends. James introduced me to my wife at the Lone Star, so I've known James for a long time. Um, uh, and the guys from Aerosmith was just taking off at that point. There was a really great singer named Reeve Little who passed. Spider John Kerner was there, who was just amazing. He was there was a place called Jack's, and there was a bar called the Plow and the Stars right down the street, and we lived right there next to that place. So we were just, it was just this enclave of people that were playing. Bonnie used to play Jack's all the time, and so John Kerner and Reeve Little was playing around. Peter Bell was another really nice, great musician who was around at that time.
He was in
Chris
Montgomery's band.
Chris Smither was there in town. I think he's still in town. He might still be in town. And Troy and my bass player and Chris keep in touch. And it was just you were literally just bumping into people. Peter Wolf and all the Jay Giles guys um, and Don managed me, Livingston Taylor, James's younger brother, and Jay Giles at that point. And then Jay Giles parted ways. They went to a different management situation. But so it was just you were just kind of crossing paths with people, and also WBCN and Charles Lacodero, who was a close friend. I was very close with Charles. So the station was very responsive and connected a lot of people. BCN was a great station.
Yeah,
and they were very, very instrumental with bringing together a lot of different things in the local scene, and we did a lot of benefits and things for BCN. So it was just, it was a community. It was a very active musical community. It was very, very vibrant, and there was a lot going on. It was a very healthy scene. So it was just it was good. It was very fortunate timing. And I think the thing that was really great about it, which Don was very aware of, was being there at that time, and in the Boston area. You have got this huge college circuit you were speaking of, and so we were really able to kind of really get exposed. We played. I think we played every college around New England. We really were on that circuit heavily.
Oh yeah.
And so that was a major part, and really, the thing that I like to make people aware of now that was different then than now is that in order to build an act, there used to be a logic to it where it was like building blocks. You would go and you would keep on the road. The road is where you would earn your net, your worth, and so you would just keep going back and keep over playing and playing and playing until you build like up many blocks and get an awareness. And it really takes that kind of live, hard work to kind of earn that staying power. And I think that's the hardest part of it.
So it was a fun time in the city of Boston during that period of time.
Yeah, it was a great. It was a great time.
And you just named a bunch of great musicians that were here doing it.
Yeah. Well, all those guys were around. And many more. And many more. There was all. That's just a fraction. There's just.
I remember the Del Fuegos during this period.
Del Fuegos were a great band. The Fools.
Right.
There's it's a long list of people. Chuck McDermott was around. He's very talented.
Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers.
Lovers were around. Yes, and the Cars then just took off a little later in the '80s. Yeah.
So there was a lot of you in Boston that were making a name for themselves.
There was a lot of people. There was a lot of really good music. Yes, there was a lot of really good music coming out of Boston. Really was. I'm sure there still is. I just things move on. I can't keep track of it. It's because there's just so many. There's just so many great things going on all over musically now that it really requires a lot of effort to just kind of keep. Pay attention to what's going on because there's so much.
So let's fast forward to 1994 when the band got back together for a short period of time, or 91, somewhere in there, when you had you had an album called It's About Time.
Right. So that the way that came about is we'd been apart, and then in the early '90s, I got a call. I got a call out of the blue from an A&R guy in Nashville named John Conn. He was with there was a label. There used to be a label called Asylum Records. It started out in the West Coast, and then Asylum set up a division in Nashville. And he called me up, and he I guess he had picked up a not a Rolling Stone, the Village Voice, and down he got a copy in Nashville and saw that we were playing around. And he called up and said, "What are you doing?" So why don't you come down here? And he set me up with co-writes with just a laundry list of the great writers. I mean, it was just something I'd never had done. I'd never had that occur before. So come down here and I'll set you up. And he set me up for 2 weeks of co-writes with, my heroes, people who were like, immensely huge to me, and a whole array of different other artists that are up and coming. And so I went down, and I'd never done that before. So I was scared to death to walk into a room with someone I'd never met and just start writing cold. So, I prepared as many notes and thoughts as I could, and then went down and wrote every day for 10 days straight until the last day when I called the last artist and said, "I don't have an idea." He said, "Come over." And when that turned out to be the day we wrote our best song, the last song, we had nothing left. But that put together a body of material that was really, really good. I mean, it was very productive. And so we went down with the band to Norbert's he then lived in Hank Williams' old estate in Franklin. And he brought us down to this A-frame, and we set up a mobile recording in there and recorded all of it. And brought it to Kyle Lenning at Asylum, and they said, "Well, we like it, but we're not going to sign you." And so I went, "Okay," and I wound up with all the songs. And so I just took all the songs and recorded them with the band, and we put it out. And that was what came out of that. And there was just a lot of really good stuff in there, even though at that time Asylum was kind of starting to, I guess the doors were just starting to close. Shania Twain had just done her first, or it was her second record there was another singer a duo she did it with, and they were veering in another direction. Then finally Asylum closed. So it was just a turning of that was another kind of major turn in the industry within Nashville.
And around that same time, you put out a best of record.
Yeah, we I tried to get all the cuts I could get together on one disc. We got as many as we could get. It's like 74 minutes, I think you can get on, and we just squeezed everything we could get on one disc. And the long and the short story of that is that I was trying to get back my masters then from Capitol, and they wouldn't give them to me. And I tried many different tacks of trying to buy back my masters, and they wouldn't give them to me. And so that was with the best of. We were hoping, to get original issue, which we couldn't do. Ironically, all these years later, maybe two or three, just before the pandemic, I believe, my current lawyer happened to be sitting in Las Vegas with the head of Universal, and Universal absorbed Capitol and all these other labels. And she just happened to be sitting with him and mentioned that I was trying to wanted to put out the early records, and they granted me the rights to the masters back. Because we said we were going to do something to donate the money. We were going to do it in conjunction with a cause called Direct Grace, which goes to rescue children sold into slavery worldwide, which is right here in Peekskill. And so that's what we committed the project to. So they said, well, if you're doing that, we're giving you your masters back. So I got the masters back, and I now have them to do original issues on with really full tilt, high res, full tilt, audiophile, master quality pressings with, really beautiful covers. But the backlog in vinyl pressing now is almost 2 or 3 years out because of how many people want to do vinyl. But down south, especially, vinyl is huge. Some of my closest friend who runs Concord Music Group down Nashville, they every artist that they release, they do like 1,000 copies pressing on, and they're backed up 2 years for their artists and their rosters.
So we
So
ever
that's
going to see these? Are they ever going to come out?
I can't tell you how long I've been trying to get this done. I mean, it's been so the good news is that I have the cover work, I have the masters, and they're all right here, right where I am here up the Hudson here, and the pressing plan is going. Forget it. We can't do anything for you right now. You're just going to have to sit. So.
Well, you can't get them on CD either. That's another
No,
thing.
it's CD. No, it's not. It's the whole idea of it is to do it to do it really high master quality vinyl. That's the whole
Yep.
It's not to do
Yep.
it CD, but it's a vinyl thing. And also, I happen to live next to a company called the Soundsmith, and Peter Letterman is just a genius. I mean, he's one of the people come to him from around the world for their styluses. He builds the most amazing styluses in the world, and his speakers and his turntables. So he's known worldwide in the audiophile community, and he's right here, and so that this has been with him to try and put this together, but we've had our hands tied.
And even digital, sometimes you can't get the stuff digitally either.
We're in a very difficult time all around on every front. I mean, I think we're seeing hardship. Everybody's seeing hardships in ways that they never could have imagined, and it's full on for sure.
But it's a good thing you have the masters now. You can do what you want with them.
We got the masters. Also, what was lucky is that our original master, there was a huge fire on the Universal lot in L.A. and all kinds of people, like all kinds of masters that people don't even know, BB King and all kinds of people, all their stuff is gone, and people don't even know it. And but ours was shipped to Kansas, and so it wasn't.
So yours was saved.
Yes. They kept the one. They wouldn't give us the 1 inch. They still have the 1 inch. They wouldn't give us that, but they gave us what they gave us. So,
Hey,
record companies are not in the business of giving you anything.
So tell me about your solo, duo, trio career after the band broke up. Tell me a little bit about that.
I've just been working on, since I started going back to Nashville, I really reconnected with my closest friends there. And there's a bunch of really with co-writers that I've been very close to and remain close to that I maintained relationships with and kept writing. Daryl Scott is one, Fred Knobloch, Gary Nicholson, Jamie Kyle. And so I kept up those writing relationships, and so I just basically kept moving forward with a body of material. And as that material came forth, I just was putting out records subsequently following what was going on, and that's continued since the pandemic had slowed down. And I still have a place in Nashville, but I'm renting it out, and I have to go back, but I have a studio here, and I've been working here, and I try and do as much live recording, but I do a lot of things here on my own and work with people, a long distance where I can. And Daryl and I have been trading tracks, and I do that. So I'm constantly just trying to build songs in whatever way I can with whatever's coming. And so that just kind of is something that's continuing. And also there's a new video that's just about to drop. I mean, if not within a day or two, that I just did here. And there's 2 more singles, and I've been following what's going on. I've just kind of been starting to roll with the idea that, even though I love albums, the attention spans are so short now, and the delivery system is really streaming, and everybody's delivery system is streaming. And so I'm really concentrating on putting out singles and videos immediately. So it just goes out, and there's no time to wait for kind of trying to, because I found on the last record I did, which I thought was the best record I ever did, which I went back to Nashville and did with Bill Vorndick before he passed. And I got Reggie Young on it before he passed, my hero, one of my heroes. And I had got the Memphis and Muscle Shoals guys on the record. And it was, I think, the best record I ever did. And it didn't do a thing. And it was with Sony Red on it. It worked it. And the whole delivery system has changed, so you put all this work into a record, and maybe a cut gets heard. And then there's just so much stuff coming out that's being released, so steadily that it's impossible. You just lose. So much of the stuff just goes right by, and you do all this work, and boom, it's kind of just passes by.
That was Talk, right? The last record you
Yeah,
did.
talk, yeah. And we worked. I can't tell you, we had such a great. That was such a great record to make. I had a bunch of the Muscle Shoals and Memphis guys on the entire sessions, and I got Reggie and Dan Dugmore and Clayton Ives from Muscle Shoals, and I got a good duet with Becca Bramlett, three duets with Jonelle Mosser, and one with Rhonda Vincent, and it was just amazing, experience making it. And the record's great, but there's just so much, there's so many things are coming from so many angles now in terms of streaming, and so it's hard to keep the attention span focused, when you're getting things out there, because people have so much coming at them.
I'm going to ask you the same question I asked James Montgomery last time I interviewed him.
Mm-hmm.
50 years is coming for the Pousette-Dart Band come 2026. Any thoughts of, if you're still around doing this, putting the band back together to memorialize 50?
We've that discussion came up not exactly in context of 50 years, but Troy. So Troy is out in California, and we've talked about it. John Curtis is up in Newburyport, Mass, and we worked with many different great drummers, but the drummer who was with us, who worked the most recently and was in for a long time, is Eric Parker, who we're all very dear, close friends. He's in Woodstock, so it really comes down to everybody's got all these these things going on with their lives, and pulling them together. It's so different than when in the old days, just go, oh yeah, let's just do it, But everybody's got all of these restraints, and they're all in different places. So yes, the answer is yes. I think it will come up. I think it almost has come up in certain ways. It's just a matter of how and when, and if the elements kind of align.
Well, look at Aerosmith. They're going out with 50 years this year. One last tour.
Yeah, well, they're listen, they've done a great job. They're a great band.
Tell me some career highlights that of your career so far.
The highlights for me were not necessarily the doing those. I mean, it was really amazing doing those gargantuan shows. When you were doing those things that were like we did the biggest grossing shows of the era. At that time. And we were also listed at that time as one of the heaviest touring bands in Billboard at that era, because that Don just literally threw us out there. He would just put us on the road, and we just stayed out there. I mean, we didn't come home we wouldn't come home for months. And so, but the things that really meant the most to me was when I was working with the people that I kind of loved the most, and like some of the highest points for me were like when we were working with Little Feat, when Lowell was alive, and doing shows with him and Bonnie early on. When I did shows with Bonnie, there was just a real chemistry. We opened some shows for both those guys, and it was just a really defined era of just great moments. And so I would say Lowell was a big influence, and it was great to kind of be able to meet him and work with those guys. That whole band was an amazing band. It's just an era's past. Working with NRBQ was one of my favorite bands. NRBQ is literally the original. NRBQ is one of my favorite bands on the planet. The original band, not It's a different band now. But I mean, with Al, who's one of my favorite guitar players. My guitar player now, who plays with me now, Jim Chaplin, plays with me and Al, and Al's killing it. I mean, he's like writing better and playing better than he's ever did in his. He says he's got so much great music on, constantly coming out. NRBQ, I loved working with those guys. I loved working with Feet and Bonnie, and we did a lot of work early on with Orleans and John Hall and those guys. And that band, right when Dance With Me was hitting, and that was just a really, there was just a lot of camaraderie and energy that was it was high. I mean, it was really high. I mean, it was like
you were in the right place at the right time, basically.
it was just a really good moment. You know, there was an exchange going on and just an appreciation. You know, a real appreciation of you know, and I think that's going on now. You know, I mean, I'm a lot older now, but when I see, you know, some of the band, an amazing amount of great bands right now. You know, when you see Tedeschi Trucks and you see some of the stuff that's out there, there's just great stuff going. And Billy Strings, oh my God, my close friend works with Billy Strings, and that, you know, those guys, he's just killing it. He's just in the thick of it now. You know, it's great seeing, you know, people when they're at that point where it's just really, you know, rocking. It's a great thing to see.
So let's talk about, you got some shows coming up. Friday
Yeah,
night, you're going to be
yeah,
in Dalton, Mass.
yeah. I'm playing for it's Arlo's son, Abe Guthrie, has got a room there, and we're doing that, and that'll be fun. You know, I'm never. It's a new room we haven't played. And I'm looking forward to that. But you know, I'm very fond of Arlo, and I used to do a lot of work with Arlo and Shenandoah too. Those guys, that was a high point too. That was also one of the great. Arlo is just a, you know, there's no one like Arlo. Period. He's the best. And then the next night we're playing
The Bull Run.
The Bull Run in Shirley, which is also a really good room and a really good staff, a really good group of people who run that place. That's a really nice room.
Really nice room.
Yeah, it really is.
Mm-hmm. And then you're back in August. You're going to be coming to the Narrow Center in Fall River.
Right.
And then up in New Hampshire at the Wildcat Inn and Tavern on the 24th.
Right.
In Ogunquit, Maine. Wow, you're going to be all over New England in August.
We jump around there, yeah.
So how do people find out about you? You have a website?
There's a website, and the website is literally things have generally been creaking at a slower pace than because I've been working on stuff, but everybody seems to be dealing with a lot of issues at the moment. But the website is just about to drop, and we've had some issues with integrating with Facebook, and the Meta people have changed their algorithms, and so we're trying to kind of marry a bunch of our things with what's going out there because the things are constantly changing. That's just about to drop. There's a new video just about to drop that I just did that that I'm really fond of. That's just about to hit, and then there's 2 more singles that are being mixed, and so I'm just gonna, you know, the idea is to just kind of keep things steadily coming as opposed to like trying to push it all into an album. For all the reasons I was just discussing before, because there's just things are moving so fast that I just want to try and get things out there as quickly as I can, you know.
So Jon Pousette-Dart is the website, right?
It's Pousette-Dart, Pousette-Dart.com, Pousette-Dart. It's like the last name, Pousette-Dart.com, yeah. And that's also the new site. That's just about to drop. It'll be within, I don't know, a couple of weeks, I think, week or 2.
And you have a YouTube channel too.
There's stuff, everything. There's stuff pretty much all over there's YouTube, there's Facebook, there's Instagram, there's, you know, all the major portals and all of the music portals, you know, iTunes and Amazon and Spotify and all those things. The music, there's channels there.
And
the channel, yeah. Well, you know, listen, you know, Dinky Dawson is an old dear friend of mine. You know, we opened the Paradise. We opened the Paradise Theater in Boston with Don, and Dinky was literally, when we started, Dinky was still hanging the speakers when people were coming in the first night when it opened, and Dinky's a dear friend. I mean, and some really, when you're talking about bright moments, some of the bright moments, really bright moments for me also when we opened for the Byrds before Clarence White died, and I was a huge Clarence White fan, and Dinky was very close with the Byrds and Steely. I mean, he was close with all of those guys, with Fleetwood Mac and all of them. He did sound for all those guys, but Dinky's system was, you know, legendary. And we did some dates with McGuinn, both with when it was the tail of before Clarence died, and then when he became Thunderbird, and he was going at Thunderbird with Rick Vito. And so we did a lot of dates with McGuinn. And Dinky is, you know, Dinky's priceless.
Yeah, he's still around selling all of his stuff.
Yeah, he's down in Police still in Plymouth, man. He's great. I mean, he's. Let me tell you something. If there's anybody who has an arsenal of tapes you want to hear, it's Dinky. He's got, man, he has got the goods. He's got a treasure trove.
Well, he's the guy that was with the original Fleetwood Mac sound guy.
He was that. And he also did the early Steely Dan stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, John, I want to say thank you for taking some time out of your busy day. I don't want to keep you any longer.
Well, it's really a pleasure to talk to you and go over and think about some of these things I haven't thought about in a long time. And I'm glad you. I really appreciate that you've had this show going for this many years and keeping on with honoring all the folks who've been doing this all along. It means a lot.
And Montgomery has been a regular on my show for many years.
James is the best. I love James. He's a sweetheart.
He's a great guy.
He really is.
Again, thank you again. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. You guys take care. It's good to see you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.